Hey guys, this is Austin. Nokia used to be one of the biggest tech companies in the world. However, after a few dark years of Windows Phone, they've actually emerged sort of better than ever, and they actually have a full lineup of Android phones and some non-Android phones. But of course, the question is, why does Nokia exist in 2018? So of course, we have to start with the Nokia 3310. Now, if this looks familiar to you, we actually did an entire video on the 3310 pretty recently. The sort of gist of it is that the original 3310 was an absolute legend, and this is sort of a modern remake with some updated internals and sort of a more importantly, some retro style. So sure, for a lot of people this is going to be a novelty rather than a phone that you're actually going to want to use every day. However, this is only one of a surprisingly large amount of phones that Nokia sells today. Where things get a little bit more interesting is with the Nokia 2. Now this takes the huge step all the way up to running Android. And with only a $100 price tag, there's a lot to like here. Crack this guy open, and the first thing we see is the phone itself. Now something that sort of separates this from a lot of other super budget phones is actually going to be the build. Around back you're going to see it's got a plastic shell, however around the actual edges and the frame it's going to be made out of aluminum. And that makes a surprisingly big difference to the actual feel in the hand. It does feel a lot nicer than the $100 price tag would suggest. But if we pop off that back panel, and what you'll find is not only a pair of SIM card slots, but you're also going to be getting micro SD expandability, and you can use all three of those at the same time. Something else you're going to find here is unfortunately an unremovable battery, but it's going to be a massive 4100 milliamp hours. So that is a very big battery for pretty much any phone. For context, most Android flagships are somewhere in the 3500 milliamp hour range. But when you consider that this is a $100 budget phone with $100 budget specs, that battery is going to make this thing last forever. What you're getting here is a pretty solid 5-inch 720p display. Now what's really impressive about this is that it actually gets surprisingly bright. I mean, yeah, of course, you see a $100 phone, you're gonna think that it's not going to be super cutting edge, but I think for most people, you're going to be totally fine with this screen. Now at this point, this is all sounding a little bit too good to be true, and where things start to fall apart is with the specs. So inside, this guy is powered by a Snapdragon 212 processor. Now that is not exactly going to be fast. It is going to be quad core, but it's only going to be using Cortex A7 cores, which are old school and very, very slow. Making things a lot worse is the idea that this only has 1 GB of RAM. Now it's going to be kind of usable, and it's going to be fine for a lot of things, but the issue is that multitasking is pretty much going to be a no-go, and apps are going to be constantly being ejected out of the memory. The good thing is this is running on Android 7.1.1 Nougat, and it will be getting an update to Oreo soon, and for the most part the software is going to be nice and clean. There's really no extra bloatware. It's going to be pretty much as you would expect to find on something like a Pixel. Around back, it's rocking an 8 megapixel camera. Now if we take a look here, you know what, that's actually not going to be that bad. I mean, it's going to be a little bit low on dynamic range, and it's still going to be a touch soft. For $100, what you're getting here is going to be solid build quality, pretty crazy battery life, at the expense of a little bit of performance. However, luckily, Nokia also has a range of other devices available, including the Nokia 6. Open this guy up, and it's immediately apparent that this is going to be a larger phone. So this guy, oh wow, you actually can tell immediately, is going to be a little bit more of a premium build. So whereas the Nokia 2 had a little bit of plastic on the back, how do you actually open this? As I was saying, the build quality is going to be a little bit more premium here. So as opposed to having just an aluminum chassis, what we're getting here is a full unibody design with actual aluminum on the back. Now the only thing that kind of jumps out to me a little bit, and honestly that's because I've been looking at so many flagships lately, is that the bezels are going to be a little bit large, but that does leave room for the actual haptic buttons on the bottom, as well as you're going to be getting an earpiece which doubles as a stereo speaker, along with, well, the little tiny one on the bottom. $1,000. Today though, I was able to pick it up on... That actually doesn't sound that great. So you can tell it is using both speakers, but it sounds a little bit muffled. I mean, it's not terrible, mind you, but it just doesn't sound very clear, which is a little bit odd for dual speakers. Inside, you're going to be getting an octa-core Snapdragon 430 processor. Now, in addition to having double the cores of the Nokia 2, they're also going to be Cortex A53 based, which is going to be significantly faster while still giving you decent battery life. Now, the rest of the specs are going to be with 3 gigs of RAM as well as 64 gigs of storage. However, one of the only things that's going to slightly let this phone down is the idea that it only has a 3000 milliamp hour battery. Now with a spec like that, it's actually not going to be that bad, but it is definitely not going to last anywhere near as long as the Nokia 2 with its massive 4,000 mAh battery. However, just like the Nokia 2, we are going to be getting a super clean build of Android, and yet again, it's going to be running Nougat with a future upgrade to Oreo. It's also using the same camera app, but it actually looks like this is a little bit of a better sensor. So as opposed to the 8 megapixel sensor on the Nokia 2, this guy is rocking 16 megapixels. Yeah, that's a lot better, especially the white balance is much more accurate. Oh yeah, no, that is going to be a big change. Might not be the greatest camera on a smartphone you've ever seen, but for the price, I'm not complaining. That's actually looking pretty nice. It might not be super exciting, but this is a fairly decent looking mid-range device, especially considering that there's a new version coming out soon. Might be worth checking out. I've got to say, Nokia has actually been doing a pretty good job so far. All of these phones are decent, if not actually pretty solid. However, the next and the newest phone I had to take a look at today is the Nokia 7 Plus. So this is a brand new device. In Europe, it should cost around 400 euros, or once it comes to the States, somewhere in the neighborhood of about $450. Now what makes this interesting is that not only does it have Android 8.0 Oreo out of the box, but it's also going to be an Android One device, meaning that it's going to get 2 years of guaranteed Android updates, as well as that same fairly stock build of Android that's going to come pre-installed. And that's actually something that Nokia is going to be doing across the board with their new phones. So everything above the Nokia 2 is going to be Android One certified. So if you want to make sure that you're going to be getting the latest updates, that's actually going to be a big win. Pop this guy open, and we're getting something that should look a lot more modern, even though these all look almost identical when you actually open them up. Whoa! This is copper? Yo, that looks really cool. I didn't realize. So when you're looking at it straight on from the back, it's mostly black, but especially when you flip it over to the side, it's got this sort of brushed copper look. And that even comes across to little things like around the camera, which also has the little Zeiss logo. Oh man, this is a really good looking phone. I can't get over just how nice this feels in the hand. So because it's got that sort of copper ridge around it, it actually does sort of settle really nicely. And on top of that, what we're going to be getting is a 6-inch display with a 18:9 aspect ratio, so it's not going to be bezel-less, but it looks a little bit nicer. And we're also going to be getting a full 2160 by 1080 resolution. Around back, you're going to be finding not only the fingerprint sensor, but also your dual cameras. So like a lot of higher end flagships, one is going to be the wide angle camera and one is going to be the telephoto option with a 2x zoom. All right, so if I take a picture of Ken on the wide angle camera and then zoom into 2x, yeah, like most of these, the telephoto camera doesn't look quite as nice, but it should be available and it should be kind of helpful to have, especially when you want to get a little bit of a different perspective on things. Interestingly, this also has a 16 megapixel camera up front. Actually, it's going to be higher megapixels than the rear. And dude, that's not bad at all, actually. There's even a little bit of depth of field there, too. Spec-wise, you're going to be getting something that's going to be basically on par with what you'd expect at the price point. A Snapdragon 660. That being said, it actually does perform pretty well, and it is going to be backed up with 4 gigs of RAM as well as 64 gigs of storage. But the question is it worth it? So we're going to be getting only a single speaker, unlike the dual speaker on the Nokia 6, but thankfully it actually does sound better. And even more thankfully, this still does have the headphone jack. So you know. So this guy is going to be rocking a 3800 mAh cell, which while not quite on par with the Nokia 2, is still going to be on the upper end of what you would find on most flagships, especially considering the slightly lower end internals in this guy. If the Nokia 7 Plus does come to the US around $450, it's actually going to be a really hard phone to beat. Now sure, you're going to be giving up a little bit of performance, but at this kind of price, you're getting nice build quality, a solid camera, good screen. I mean, really the only thing I can complain about is it doesn't have stereo speakers, and even then, the speaker itself here sounds pretty good, so Nokia has seen a massive turnaround. Now of course, some people are going to miss the old Windows Phone days, but now that they're making Android devices, they're actually doing a really good job of making decent mid-range as well as budget devices that have solid build quality, good battery life, and just have a nice clean build of Android that's actually going to get updates. So, should they exist in 2018? Yeah, of course they should. They're doing some really cool stuff. I've got to say, I'm actually happy that I got to give a good answer on one of these. Anyway guys, hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to check out any of this stuff, the link will be in the description, and I will catch you in the next one.